All right. Welcome back to U.S. History Lecture Videos. I'm Mrs. Richardson. Today we're covering two lessons, Relief from the Chaos of Urban Life and Change Reflected in Thought and Writing. So by the end of today's lesson, you should be able to identify how each class of Americans responded to the challenges associated with urban life, explain the process of machine politics and how it brought relief to working class Americans, identify how American writers, fiction and nonfiction, helped Americans to better understand the changes they faced in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and identify some of the influential women and African American writers of the era. So, first up, as a reminder, during the second half of the 19th century or the 1800s, urban life in industrial America grew rapidly. And so, we've talked a lot about the challenges that cities faced, some of the reform movements that came around. We're going to continue talking about this time period for a little bit longer. So, working class citizens face many challenges in the large city areas, and there are two key ways of coping: machine politics and popular entertainment. We're going to talk about both of those today. So, in a minute, I'll talk about what machine politics is, and popular entertainment, fairly self explanatory, right? Distraction, being entertained, being able to take a break from thinking about your life and think about something else for a little while. So, machine politics, a quick fix. Machine politics is a phrase that referred to the process by which every citizen of the city, no matter their ethnicity or race, so everyone, had a spokesperson, was a ward resident with an alderman or a city leader who spoke on their behalf at City Hall. So, nobody was unrepresented. However, it was a corrupt process. Citizens approached their local politicians or aldermen with issues, and the politicians got things done in exchange for votes to keep them in office. So, corrupt, but effective. Vote for me, and I will continue to support your needs. Don't, and I won't. So, it was very much an exchange system. It allowed a lot of things to actually get done. Aldermen would address these issues on behalf of the people that they were representing, because without representing their people well, they would not be voted back into office. So machine politics, commonplace during major cities during this time. But again, quite corrupt, especially the higher up you got in the system, the more and more corrupt it was. The second part, popular culture, entertainment. Entertainment provided relief from daily struggles. Maybe you're working 60 hours a week and you still can't afford to feed your family. So your wife has to work 60 hours a week and your oldest son has to work 60 hours a week, right? Distraction from the discomfort of where you're living and what you're going through became popular. Things like amusement parks in Coney Island, or I should say Coney Island was an amusement park. It offered rides, shows, and curiosities, and was affordable escape for the working class families. This appealed to the masses, was very, very cheap to get into, and many, many, many people came, and it was one of the first forms of modern entertainment. We also see more stage shows with singing, dancing, comedies, animals, magic. This time period launched the career of the famous performer Harry Houdini. And in addition to live theater shows, it was primarily working class citizens who enjoyed the very beginning of the Nickelodeon, which was kind of a step before the movie theater. The first Nickelodeon opened in Pittsburgh in 1905. Nearly 100 visitors packed into a storefront theater to see a traditional vaudeville show interspersed with 1-minute film clips. So we got singing, dancing, comedy, animals, beginning of film clips. We also see the growth of baseball during this time, provided affordable entertainment for people, and helped create a unified civic identity. You belong to a team, right? We see this in today's era. People are pretty dedicated to their sports teams, and so this created a sense of unity among various people in different areas of the United States, cheering for a particular team. Other popular sports like college football and boxing also grew during this time as a form of entertainment and distraction. And then lastly, dime novels. Short, inexpensive fiction books, mass produced due to improved printing technology. Now many people could buy books for very cheap. They were called dime novels for a reason. They might only cost a dime. And therefore they were more affordable, popular with the working class, criticized by the middle class. Often set in the American West or wilderness. Quick, easy, entertaining reads. Now, women were actually both the consumers and authors of dime novels. The short stories or the stories often featured female main characters or female protagonists, and the characters reinforced the cultural norms of feminine virtue. Some women authors actually sold tens of thousands of copies, so that was a step up for women. Entertainment overall provided escape from urban challenges and brought people together across different backgrounds and served to shape American culture, especially in large cities. Second part of our lesson, change reflected in thought and writing. So with all of these changes, we also see authors and different theories trying to adjust how we think and write about how we think. So the first major thing that we see during this time period is Darwin's theory of evolution, which you've probably heard of, but it was fairly new. 1859 is when it was published. On the origin of species. It was a theory of evolution that proposed that species evolve through natural selection. This contradicted the common popular idea of divine creation and sparked a lot of controversy, especially in religious groups, starting to change the way people think about things. And we see several other categories of isms that I'm just going to kind of briefly go over here. All right. Another one is social Darwinism, which is kind of the idea of survival of the fittest, but it takes Darwin's ideas of natural selection and evolution and applies them to human society. It claims that some people succeed due to inherent or traits that they are born with and adaptability. Wealthy people saw their success as proof of their human fitness. Critics argue that it ignored unequal opportunities. Pragmatism and instrumentalism, different ideas as well. William James developed pragmatism, which emphasized experimenting with ideas to find the truth. John Dewey built on pragmatism to create instrumentalism, which advocated education as a tool for social reform. Lots of isms here, and you'll have the opportunity to kind of study them or study one in more depth. Realism in art. So more and more artists sought to portray real life in their art. We see things looking more realistic, portraying working class life, depicting slums, tenements, and working class leisure, rather than the more romantic style of paintings that came before, that sort of made things look prettier than perhaps they were in real life. And this realism also came across in literature. Authors embraced more realism to talk about social issues, slums, the war. Books explored life in the iron mills. Mark Twain addressed corruption and frontier life, and so on and so forth. We also see more women's voices in literature. Kate Chopin portrayed women's lives very realistically, and she was a writer who paved the way for more explicit feminist literature that came after her. She explored the experiences of Southern women in her book, in her writings. African American literature also started to rise at this time. It addressed race issues, was written in both the standard English and the Black dialect. This particular author, Paul Laurence Dunbar, wrote plays, poetry, and novels, and provided an African American perspective on literature, through literature, on culture and American life. All right, that's Kate Chopin's novel. So the impact of realist literature, these authors provided insights into unfamiliar worlds. People often were very isolated among their class and had very little information about how the other class lived. And so this kind of created some connection, and if nothing else, brought more awareness to the upper class of how the lower class was actually living, which helped influence social reform movements that came later on. All right, so in conclusion, the 19th century saw lots of changes. We've been talking about that for multiple videos. Today we focused on new ways of thinking, new scientific and philosophical theories, new mindsets behind literature and art, and how realism brought attention to social issues by capturing what the reality was.